The sun hung lazily in the afternoon sky, casting a warm glow over the quiet town of Brooksville. It was one of those places where everyone knew each other, where small talk at the grocery store lasted longer than the actual shopping. The streets were lined with mom-and-pop shops, their windows filled with handwritten signs advertising fresh produce, discounts, and community events. Among the familiar faces in town was Marcus Carter, a hard-working black man in his late 20s. He had grown up in Brooksville, watching his mother, Linda Carter, work tirelessly to provide for him. She was a kind-hearted woman in her 60s, always offering a warm smile to strangers and a helping hand to those in need. Though life had never been easy, she carried herself with quiet dignity, refusing to let hardship define her. That afternoon, Linda decided to take her usual walk to the local grocery store. Her legs weren't as strong as they used to be, but she still preferred walking over driving. It gave her time to breathe, to wave at the neighbors, to feel the world moving around her. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, she had no idea that danger was lurking just ahead. A few blocks away, Officer Grant sat in his patrol car, his fingers drumming impatiently against the steering wheel. He was known around town, not for kindness, but for his aggressive policing, especially toward people like Linda. He scanned the street, his gaze narrowing as he spotted her. A slow smirk spread across his face. Without hesitation, he turned on his siren and pulled up beside her. Linda stopped in her tracks as the loud blare of a police siren shattered the calm afternoon. She turned to see a black and white patrol car rolling up beside her. The driver's window lowered, revealing Officer Grant's sharp, unwelcoming eyes. "You," he barked, stepping out of the car. "Where do you think you're going?" Linda blinked, confused. "Excuse me?" "I asked you a question," Grant snapped, folding his arms across his chest. "Where are you headed?" Linda straightened her back. "I'm going to the store." "Is something wrong, officer?" Grant scoffed. "You tell me. You look suspicious, walking around like that." A few people on the sidewalk slowed their pace, sensing the tension. Some stopped completely, watching from a distance. Linda forced a polite smile. "I've lived here for 40 years. I walk this way all the time." Grant took a step closer. "Maybe today's the day you decided to cause trouble." Linda's smile faded. She had seen men like him before, the ones who thrived on intimidation, who wielded their badge like a weapon instead of a shield. But she wasn't going to let him scare her. "I'm just trying to buy some groceries," she said firmly. Grant's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to people standing up to him, especially not someone like her. The watching crowd grew, their murmurs blending with the distant hum of traffic. Phones began appearing in people's hands, cameras rolling. "You're resisting an officer," Grant growled. Linda frowned. "No, I'm not." But Grant wasn't listening. His temper flared. Before anyone could react, he raised his fist and punched her. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. Linda's frail body crumpled to the ground, her purse spilling onto the pavement. The world seemed to freeze. A woman screamed. Someone shouted, "What the hell is wrong with you?" But Grant stood over her, unbothered. Linda lay motionless for a moment, her head spinning, pain radiating from her cheek. She blinked up at the sky, trying to process what had just happened. The murmurs turned to outrage. Cameras zoomed in. And just as Grant turned to walk away, a voice rang out. "Mom?" The crowd parted as Marcus came running, his face a mixture of shock and fury. And in that moment, everything changed. Marcus Carter had just finished his shift at the auto repair shop when his phone buzzed in his pocket. Wiping his hands on a rag, he glanced at the screen. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something told him to pick up. "Hello?" A shaky voice came through the line. "Marcus, you need to come to the grocery store. It's your mom." His heart stopped. "What? What happened?" "It's Officer Grant. He hit her." Marcus's body went numb. The world around him faded. His mother, had been assaulted by a cop. Rage shot through his veins like wildfire. His grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles turned white. Where is she now? She's on the ground. She's hurt, man. You need to hurry. Marcus didn't wait for another word. He threw the rag down and bolted for his car, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. His hands trembled as he jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life, but his mind was drowning in a storm of emotions, fear, anger, helplessness. The drive to the grocery store felt like a lifetime. His fingers gripped the steering wheel so hard they ached. As he neared the store, he saw flashing police lights, a crowd, and then his mother. She was on the ground, clutching her face, her body small and fragile under the weight of what had been done to her. And standing over her, arms crossed, was Officer Grant. Marcus barely felt himself slam the car door shut. His blood boiled. His jaw clenched. Everything inside him screamed for justice. Marcus stormed through the crowd, pushing past people until he reached his mother's side. He knelt beside her, his hands shaking as he touched her shoulder. "Mom," he whispered. "Mom, are you okay?" Linda's eyes fluttered open, pain written across her face. "Marcus." That one word, the weakness in her voice, broke him. He looked up and locked eyes with Officer Grant. Grant stood there, arms crossed, wearing a smug expression. Like he had done nothing wrong. Like this was just another day. Marcus rose to his feet slowly, his body trembling with fury. "You did this?" Grant shrugged. She was resisting. A bitter laugh escaped Marcus's lips. "Resisting? She's a 60-year-old woman. What the hell is wrong with you?" The crowd edged closer, their phones still recording. Some murmured in agreement. Others whispered words of support. But Grant wasn't fazed. She should have listened. "Now, get out of my face before you end up like her." Marcus took a step forward. The air between them was electric, charged with unspoken violence. His fists clenched at his sides. But he wouldn't give Grant what he wanted. He wouldn't lose control. "I'm not going anywhere," Marcus said through gritted teeth. "You don't get to walk away from this." Grant's smirk widened. "You gonna stop me, tough guy?" Marcus held his ground. "No. The whole damn world is." Grant's expression darkened. He didn't like losing control of the situation. With an angry grunt, he threw a punch. The crowd gasped. But Marcus saw it coming. He dodged, just in time. Grant's fist cut through the air, missing its target. Before Grant could recover, Marcus struck back. His fist connected with Grant's jaw, hard. The impact sent the officer stumbling backward, his cocky smirk wiped clean off his face. The crowd exploded. Cheers, shouts, phones capturing every second. Grant staggered, his face twisted in disbelief. He hadn't expected that. For the first time, he looked afraid. Marcus stood tall, his fists still clenched, his breath heavy. He could feel the weight of every injustice his people had faced burning in his veins. But he wouldn't let rage consume him. That's what they wanted. So instead, he turned back to his mother, kneeling beside her once more. "Help is coming, Mom," he whispered. "This isn't over." And for the first time, Grant realized he had lost. The silence after the punch was deafening. Then, chaos erupted. The crowd, once hesitant, now roared with energy. Cheers, gasps, and shouts filled the air. Every phone was up, cameras rolling. The entire town had just witnessed what happened, and no one was going to forget it. Officer Grant stumbled back, touching his jaw in shock. His smug confidence had shattered, replaced by anger and humiliation. He reached for his radio, his voice sharp. "Backup. I need backup now." But no one was listening to him. Because the people weren't afraid anymore. A young woman in the crowd stepped forward. "You think calling for backup will save you?" she snapped. The whole world is watching. Another man shook his head. You crossed the line, Grant. This time, you're the one in trouble. Grant's face twisted with rage. He scanned the faces around him, but no one backed down. Instead, the crowd grew stronger. People were sharing the video in real time. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, the footage spread like wildfire. Tag the news stations, someone yelled. Within minutes, reporters were flooding the scene. Local news. National news. Everyone wanted the story. A journalist pushed a microphone toward Marcus. Marcus, can you tell us what happened here today? Marcus looked down at his mother, still shaken but holding his hand tightly. He exhaled sharply and faced the camera. This isn't just about my mom, he said, his voice steady. This is about justice. This is about every innocent person who's been bullied, beaten, and silenced. And we're done being silent. The crowd cheered. And at that moment, Officer Grant realized his power was gone. The next day, the entire country was talking about it. News anchors replayed the footage over and over. Officer assaults elderly woman in broad daylight. The pressure was too much. The mayor held an emergency press conference. The police department was forced to respond. An investigation was opened against Officer Grant. The world waited. Would this be another case of injustice swept under the rug? Not this time. The evidence was too clear. The video was undeniable. Protests erupted across the town. People marched with signs that read, "Justice for Linda. Stop police brutality. No more fear." Marcus stood at the front of the crowd, using his voice, not his fists, to fight back. At a rally, he grabbed the microphone and looked out at the sea of people. "This isn't just my story," he said. "This is our story. And we won't stop until justice is served." The courtroom was packed on the day of the trial. Officer Grant sat stiffly in his uniform, but this time, there was no smirk on his face. The judge played the video evidence. The jury didn't take long to decide. Verdict, guilty. The moment the words were spoken, a wave of relief washed over the room. Officer Grant was stripped of his badge. He was sentenced to prison time for assault and abuse of power. Marcus and his mother sat in the front row, holding hands. For the first time in a long time, they felt safe. As they walked out of the courtroom, cameras surrounded them. "Marcus, how do you feel now that justice has been served?" a reporter asked. Marcus looked at his mother, then at the crowd of supporters. "I feel like we finally proved something," he said. "We proved that no one is above the law." And the world listened. The trial was over, but the battle for justice had only just begun. Marcus knew that this moment, this victory, was just a small piece of a much larger fight. For days after the court ruling, his face was plastered on TV screens, his voice echoing in interviews. But it wasn't about the attention. It wasn't about him. It was about the message. He began to speak out, refusing to let hate and anger overshadow the importance of what they had just accomplished. "This is bigger than one officer," Marcus said in one of his speeches. "This is about a system that has failed too many people for too long. This is about standing up for what's right." He teamed up with local advocacy groups, traveling across the state to give talks, raise awareness, and support others who had suffered at the hands of injustice. His message was clear: no one is above the law, and we all have a responsibility to make sure that the law serves everyone equally. But even as Marcus spoke of justice, his mother, Linda, was struggling with her own pain. Though she was still recovering physically from the assault, her spirit remained unbroken. Each time Marcus spoke to the public, she stood by his side, her strength becoming an inspiration to many. "I may be hurt," she told the crowd one day, her voice firm despite the bruises that still marked her face, "but I will never let that stop me from fighting for what's right. We all have to be brave, together." Her words rang out, powerful and clear, and the community listened. People began to come together. Neighbors, activists, even strangers from other parts of the country started sending messages of solidarity. The marches didn't stop. The fight didn't stop. It wasn't just about Officer Grant anymore. It was about a community uniting to fight the deep-rooted racism that had long held them back. People of all races, backgrounds, and walks of life were speaking out. The voices of the oppressed grew louder, stronger. "We are stronger than hate," Marcus said at one of the rallies, his words like a rallying cry. "And together, we can create the change we've been waiting for." Final words that make an impact, 500 words. Months passed, but the work wasn't done. The case against Officer Grant was just one step, one victory in the larger battle. Marcus knew that in order to make real, lasting change, the people had to continue fighting, not with violence, but with unity. He stood at the front of another rally, his voice steady, his eyes full of determination. Behind him, a giant screen displayed the words, "Justice for all." "Look around you," Marcus said, spreading his arms wide to encompass the crowd. "This is what change looks like. This is what happens when we stand up for what's right. Together, we are unstoppable." The crowd cheered, some wiping tears from their eyes. Marcus's message had resonated with everyone there, and it was spreading. "Racism is not a thing of the past," he continued. "It's not something we can just ignore or sweep under the rug. We have to keep fighting. Every day, in every way we can, we have to be the change." The audience was silent now, hanging on his every word. There was no more noise, just the power of his message, the weight of his truth. We all have a role to play. Whether it's speaking up in our communities, educating ourselves, or supporting one another, we have to keep moving forward. But the most important thing? We cannot let hate win. The crowd stood in unison, their hearts and minds lifted by his words. The energy was palpable, a sense of urgency, hope, and power radiating from everyone in the crowd. "As we leave here today," Marcus said softly, "I want you to remember one thing. Justice isn't just something that happens in a courtroom. It happens when we stand up for what's right, no matter the cost." His final words struck a chord with everyone there. The audience was deeply moved. Some cried. Some cheered. Others nodded, as if they were waking up from a long, painful sleep. And together, Marcus concluded, we can change the world. Now, let's make sure the world hears our voice. As he spoke, the energy of the crowd shifted. It wasn't just about the words anymore, it was about action. His call to action was clear: share this story. Talk to your friends. Speak out. We can make a difference. Together, we will. The crowd erupted. Phones were pulled out. Videos. Tweets. Posts. The message was spreading. And as it spread, it didn't just inspire. It changed lives. And in that moment, Marcus knew the fight was far from over.